Thank you, David. What's up? All right, so I'm going to say this one time and not have to repeat it 40 times. So I wasn't here Sunday because we were waiting on a COVID test, not mine, but Brenda's. She had bronchitis last week and went to the doctor, and the doctor, of course, ordered a COVID test, and that was on Thursday. I don't know if you read it in the paper this week or not, but Thursday was the absolute apex of the number of tests taken in America for COVID. So all of those tests went to labs, and as a result, we didn't get the word back until yesterday morning. So we were just kind of playing it safe in terms of not getting out, and we didn't really know it. Came back negative, everything's hunky-dory. But anyway, that's why I wasn't here on Sunday morning, and I feel fine. But I do appreciate your prayers, your concern. I've had emails and texts and so forth. One person, Mark Palmer, thought I was preaching for another church. He asked me on the way in, he said, what church are you going to? I said, well, they haven't made the offer yet, so I don't know. I'm glad you're here. This is a continuation of our Wednesday sessions to try to learn some things that we need to learn about the problems of racism in our community and in our nation. And I really appreciate all of you being here. As I look around the room, it's been very consistent. We still have folk from other churches here, and I'm glad. So I think you will really enjoy this evening. Let's begin our time with prayer. Father, we thank you for the gift of this day. We trust that, at least in some measure, we have used the time that you have given us in the right ways. We've been good stewards of that time and the opportunities that you give us to serve you and to love people in your name. We are grateful for the opportunity to be here. We are standing on the shoulders of a lot of people, not the least of which are people who, in many measures, sacrificed to make this facility available many years ago and established ongoing effective ministry in this place. And we continue to enjoy the benefits of that work even today. And we find ourselves, Lord, in circumstances that we don't fully understand. We're still trying to understand. We're grateful for the resources that you have provided in Pierce Story and his sharing over the last 3 weeks, and now in Melvin Wright being here to share with us tonight. As we go forward, we ask that you would help us to understand more fully what it means to give ourselves to the achievement of your kingdom. That's what you've called us to do, and we believe that equity and justice and mercy are significant parts of that kingdom. And so we're looking for ways to do that well so that people will honor and glorify you. We offer this prayer in the name of the one who gave his life as a sacrifice so that we could be on equal footing with each other and in good standing with you. In Jesus' name, amen. So just a few weeks ago, I met Brother Melvin Wright on a Zoom call that the Inasmuch Ministry was conducting about food packing. And we were talking about what that looks like, and he was learning about that and asked if, said his church has a food pantry, and they were getting ready to distribute some food in the community as a part of their local ministry, and wondered what the chance of getting some of that food might be. Well, we weren't quite ready at that moment to say, but a little later that day, we were able to, and I called him and I said, we'd love to give you this food. And by the way, the young people of this church are going to pack that food. 7,500 meals on August the 1st as a mission project for that day right here. and then his church will come and pick those up and over a period of time distribute those meals in the community to people who need it. So we've already got a kind of a relationship. It just kind of, well, I think that's a God thing when things happen like that. So I asked him, I said, he said, what do we owe you for these meals? I said, tell you what, I'll make you a deal. You won't find too many Baptist preachers that'll do that. Only interims are confident enough to do that. But I said, if you'll come and share with our people what it is like to be a part of the black community and the black experience in America, the good, the bad, and the ugly, then you can have those meals, not pay a penny. And he agreed to that deal. Can you imagine? So he's here tonight at my invitation, and because we all recognize that as much as we appreciate Pierce's sharing with us over the last 3 weeks, we really do need to hear from not just one but several people who have lived in circumstances that are most likely, we'll hear about that tonight, different from the circumstances a lot of us have had. And we need to learn about that. We need to learn how there are disadvantages because the color of your skin is not white here in America. Most of us have not felt that and experienced it. So Brother Wright is the pastor of Bethany Missionary Baptist Church, and they're a very mission-minded church. He was just sharing with me some of the things that they're doing. Not a large church, but he's been there since 2007, I think you said, and been in Knoxville since 94. Yeah, since 94. So without any further ado, Brother Wright, come on up and share with us. And there will be a Q&A time, so you can be ready for that.
Yes, I welcome the Q&A time. In fact, I want to thank you, Pastor David, for this is a larger crowd even than I expected. What a great crowd. I want to thank you for your invitation, and I am excited and happy to be here. Now, I want to give you first a little rundown on what I plan to do. My basic format for this is going to be, I'm going to give you a little introduction. Now, I don't need much because obviously you've already heard a little bit about who I am. But I'm going to give you some of my personal history. Along with that, we're going to talk about my experiences, personal experiences related to a couple of things. One is policing. Another is work life. And a third are some faith-based issues that I've had to deal with. So, I'm okay if you want to ask a question while we're talking. So just let me know, and if I see you, well, just raise my hand, and I'll raise your hand, and we'll respond to however best we can. Now, first of all, you've heard that I do pastor the Bethany Baptist Church here in Knoxville. It's a small, as I like to call it, intimate congregation. We're in North Knoxville. Everybody knows what the Broadway Shopping Center is? Okay, it's behind the Broadway Shopping Center, just off Woodland. Small brick building. Many of you may have already seen it. I've been there for 13 years, since 2007 with my wife, Deborah. It's a challenge, but I'm always excited about the opportunities to go out and meet new people. Now, one of the things that I'm really excited about here is that you've been so open enough to invite me. So I expect questions. You okay? You okay? All right, good. And I will be frank and open and honest, because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to grow together. And I have to admit, unfortunately, I have some. I would say some, I don't want to call it a large number, but I have white friends who have already established, they're still my friends, I still love them, have already decided what they know is what they know. And I try to explain that you can't just assume that what you know is what you know, but you have to ask questions. And that's why I'm really excited about being here today. Now I want to talk first And I'm speaking quickly because I don't want to bog down the time. I'll speak first about my earliest memory. One of my earliest memories is a day I was leaving my grandmother's house with my mother. We were going home back in Philadelphia many years ago. I know I was young because there was a blue stroller involved, which, of course, I wanted to ride in, but my mother didn't want me to. She wanted me to walk on my own. But we had a discussion. I don't remember the exact question that I posed to her. But I posed some question to her, and she, in turn, heard a response which in essence was that I couldn't do that because I was colored. Now, you have to understand, this is probably, 1956. I was a wee tot at the time. I was born in 1953, by the way. So this is one of my earliest memories. So right away, I knew that there was something different about me, and that thing was that I was colored. Now, what that meant, I wasn't so sure. I didn't quite understand, but later on, I began to understand more of what that was about. Some years later, I was coming home from school with a friend. Can't remember his name. His name was Kenneth, and he was escorting his sister home. We had to walk from the school to the trolley station, which was about a block away from the school. And on the way, we met some boys who were coming from the local Catholic school. Corpus Christi was I remember the name of the Catholic school. And somehow, I maybe bumped them, and I turned around and looked at them. Now, I was probably in the 5th, 6th grade, something like that. Maybe a little younger. And I noticed that they took issue with the fact that I looked at them. Because the day or two later, while we were going home, they decided that they were going to accost me for having the nerve to look at them when we passed them or slightly bumped them. And so what happened after that was that from my perspective, wanting to separate myself from my friend and his younger sister, I left them, and of course he kind of left because he didn't want to have any part of this. And I ran away, but I was chased by them. They had some sort of chain that they attempted to beat me with. They only hit me once, and had made some threats. And then I saw them later, and they said, "Yeah, that's the colored boy who we chased with the chain." No problem. For me, it was done. Probably for them as well. But what that does is it kind of shapes your identity and saying, "Okay, I know I'm different." Now, I didn't feel particularly inferior. So I should make that clear. Most people don't necessarily feel inferior. I would just identify now that we have these separate, theirs are a part of another. And this was made really crystal clear. I don't know if you are familiar or historically with a former mayor of the city of Philadelphia. His name is Frank Rizzo. And now I'm about 15. And I'm leaving my home, going to visit a girlfriend who lives about a mile away. Probably on a Sunday evening, because that's usually when I would go. And I'm about halfway between my house, her house. And a police van pulls up on my right. I'm on the left-hand side of the street. Police van comes down the street, pulls up on my right. And he stops me. And he called me, I don't remember, he said, "Hey," or whatever he said. And I stopped. I'm thinking, what's wrong? What's up with him? And I happened to look to my right, and there was his partner coming at me with his gun drawn. So you talk about, you hear a lot of issues about policing in the black community. Now I hear, let me explain. I was in the white neighborhood, which was adjacent to ours. So what I learned from that was that typically, when we think of policing, we think of the police department to serve and protect. That's kind of what our assumption is of what they do. They serve, they protect. But in the black community, where they consider the police not so much as their enemy, but the fact that they're there to guard them. They protect everybody else from them. And that's and rightly or wrongly, that is the perception. Now let's move on. I had several other incidents like that. We won't have to go through all of that. We call it stop while being black. I won't have to go through all of those things, but once I got into the military, I took my oath to protect and defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to obey the orders of those who are above me. Well, that's fine as long as the people who are above you see eye to eye with you, and if they don't, then they can make things difficult for you. I'm going to give you all the details, but what ended up happening was I ended up leaving the Navy based on a psychological profile that I was, I don't want to say undesirable. That's not exactly what it was, because the discharge was honorable, but yet it was more of a general discharge because I was evaluated in a way such that they encouraged me to leave. Let me put it that way. But that was, certainly that was not the end of it. But I want you to understand, not all of my experiences have been negative, although many have. But not all have. But there's something that I learned in all of this. Even in the midst of all of that, even in the midst of that, if I had a strong focus, my family gave me a strong background, a strong underpinning in faith. And because of my personality, I was not easily angered. I won't say easily, but once I didn't get angry, because I was had one of those personalities where once I got angry, it was anger. It was anger. It was real, and it could be volatile. But praise God, I was able to control that. Now I'm going to skip ahead to a number of years, decades, in fact. And I want to talk about my work life. Now, my work life after I got out of college. Oh, first of all, let me talk about college. My undergraduate education was at Temple University, and I studied engineering. Mechanical engineering, technology and design was the specific course description. And I went there based on a recruitment program called Special Recruitments and Admissions Program. Now, the Special Recruitments or Admissions Program, or SRAP as it was called, was designed for students who may have not had the basic fundamentals in their high school career, so that they could achieve some level of success at the college level. Now, and I said to myself, you know what? I don't know whether I'm qualified or not, but I'm going to apply for this. And so I did. I just say that to say that to start this part of it, everybody's had their opinions about affirmative action and what that means. I'll tell you what it meant for me. Every not only that college education, but every meaningful position that I've had in my life was the result of an affirmative action hire. Every one. And some of them were significant. Even when I came to Knoxville, I was an affirmative action hire at the Tennessee Valley Authority. Now, what does that mean? That for me, it wasn't the issue of affirmative action. For me, it was the issues that caused that to be necessary. Why did it take affirmative action for me to be hired at TVA? Why did it take affirmative action for me to be hired at Merck & Company? Why did it take those things in order for me to fulfill or fill or use, I should say, the gifts that God has given me? Why did it take that? Well, that was because, and we all know it is because of, and we hate to use that word, we hate to use the word, it's because of systemic racism. Some people, I'm going to throw that out there. I don't know how people feel about that. But because of these systemic issues, it was necessary for somebody to be forced either by pay incentives or simply by company rules to go out and hire somebody that didn't look like everybody else. Even my supervisor when I worked for the city of Knoxville decided that he wanted to hire someone who didn't look like everybody else in the department because it was a pretty homogeneous department. So he wanted to hire somebody that looked different. And I had no problem with that. For me, I'm thinking, whatever gets me in the door. You know, some people think, well, you know, do you feel demeaned by it? No, I feel like I got a paycheck. And so, but that's the kind of thing that we live with. It's always, and let me tell you what the effect of that is on the individual. Everything you view through the prism of those incidents. Everything you do, everything you see, everything that happens to you is colored by the effects of those things that happen. So when we see George Floyd died in front of us, that wasn't a singular incident. That wasn't the result of one thing happening. It was the result of a shared experience by millions of people. Have this shared experience of being marginalized, a shared experience of an unjust policing, a shared experience that says that could have been me, that could have been my son, that could have been someone I know, someone I love. That George Floyd was kind of like the everyman in the black community. Regardless of what his background was, because of his personal history, because personal history has no effect when it comes to unjust policing. Who you were is irrelevant to what happens in that moment. What happens in that moment. So when we talk about those things, I'd like for us not to talk about someone's background. I'd like not to talk about what may have even brought them to that moment. Let's talk about what happens in that moment, because in that moment, he and like many others that weren't on tape are out of control. It was a moment that had maybe it had something to do with what was going on just a few moments before, or maybe it didn't. But the fact is that it happened not because he or anyone like him was doing anything, but it was because of a separate kind of system for different people. It's a separate system and it sets up the us versus them mentality. And that's not what we want in this country. We don't want an us versus them, because that's not productive. That's not helpful. That doesn't promote this kind of dialogue, this kind of discussion. And I'm hoping that we can have some real dialogues here. I have a whole list of misconceptions, but I'm not going to get into those things just yet. But I'd rather kind of hear from you. I will give you one last thing, excuse me, as far as my own life concerns, and it has to do with with my work life. I used to work for a company called Merck. You've heard of Merck, they're a pharmaceutical company, huge pharmaceutical company. And I worked in their facilities design and project management department in West Point, Pennsylvania. And I worked as an engineer there. And there was this one project where I and another biological engineer were working on the construction, or the design anyway, of a facility to manufacture a drug that would address hepatitis B based on using recombinant DNA technology. His responsibility was to handle the manufacturing of the drug. Mine was the design and construction of the facility. Now, we worked very well together, but he found a better job at a different pharmaceutical company. He moved on. And then they hired someone else. Now, this other person was not quite as good at what he did than the original bioengineer. And he fell behind in his work. And when pressed on it, he told his superiors that it was my fault. Of course, none of my work was ever behind, because that's how I worked. It was my fault. Now, it wasn't that he blamed me, which bothered me a little, but that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was that everyone believed him and not me. Even my boss, who was subordinate to his boss, believed him, not me. I was put on probation. I was taken off that project. And I had to really do some real soul searching. I had to determine how I was going to proceed, what was going to happen. And this is sort of a microcosm for life in general. I had to decide. I had to give all of that over. This is the faith part that comes out. I had to give all of that over to the Lord, all of it, because I was hurt. I was angry. I wanted to fight. I mean, all of that. When I talked about before about all of that stuff that comes out all of a sudden. It was coming up all of a sudden. I remember sitting in my bathroom crying, because I was so upset about what had happened. I was asking God, why me? But what came out of that was two things. One, I learned, rather than to expend all that energy about focusing on him, about what he did, I took all of that and focused on what I could do. And ultimately, I learned how to forgive that person. So much so that I called him later on in an attempt not to even discuss that, but to just gain some information. He wouldn't talk to me. I thought that was interesting. I said, maybe I should be the one not talking to you. But I understood why he did, and I forgave that. But I said all that to say that these are the kinds of things that we live with daily. All kinds of things. We have to be careful about. There's things that you probably don't even notice. Let me give you an example. If there's a group of people on an elevator, doors open, black person gets on, he is thinking, how can I get on this elevator in a non-threatening way? You probably don't even think about that. I need to get on. I need to stand in this elevator so these people don't feel uncomfortable. Now, it's not a conscious thing. It just comes up, because we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, thereby causing a reaction that could escalate into something else. And so as a result of that, these are the kinds of things that we deal with early on, or all along. And it doesn't matter your income, it doesn't matter your social status, none of that matters. That's irrelevant. It doesn't matter where you live in what's called the inner city or you live in the suburb. Those things are common. Those things are common among black people, whether they live in if you let's think of the black community as in general, regardless of where you live. Because that's common, those are common kinds of concerns everywhere. I've been walking down the street and dressed in a suit and tie and feel the anxiety while standing at a corner, somebody drives up, the doors in the car locked. I could feel it. I could feel the anxiety. It's not just me. Say, maybe he's, that's just him. But you could sense when women clutch their purse, when they walk a little further away. Those things are things that I've lived with forever. But you know what? You learn to deal with it. And there are many misconceptions which I'm not going to deal with as misconceptions here because I'll be going down rabbit holes. But we don't have to deal with that. But what I would like, if at all possible, is to hear some of your questions. These are my own personal experiences, some of them. But I would like to hear from you. I'd like to hear if there are some questions. I'll do some more ranting if I don't hear questions. But but I would like to hear some questions.
So that the folks who are watching the live stream, we are still doing that, can hear the question. I'm going to try to get a microphone to you. Whether they can see you or not, they can at least hear you. And I think that's important to hear a question. So, okay, David, surprise. David Campbell's first.
Okay, you've introduced me to something, a misconception of mine. I've always viewed racism as just another form of bullying, which it is.
There's that aspect.
Which it is. But the pervasiveness of it that you describe is shocking. And I'm a little flabbergasted by it. And even though I've watched the progress, you and I are the same age.
Okay.
I've watched the same things on TV that you've watched. I heard Dr. King's speech on the mall.
Okay.
I saw the Watts riots. I've seen the progression over the last 60 years. And but until you've walked the walk, we can't know that. But here we are. Yeah. What do we do? I keep coming back to, okay, I get it. I don't understand. I don't get on a bus and go, how do I not threaten the people on the bus? That's right on my head. Okay, I get it. So what can we do practically to heal? And that's where I come from as the real problem. Practical steps.
Well, I'm glad you asked that question, and thank you for that response. What can we do to heal? What a kind of question. What a wonderful question that is. I see that as being multifaceted. First, I think there are things like this where people are willing to ask questions and to hear a perspective maybe that they hadn't heard before. And you have conversations. See, the difficult conversations are the hard part. And what I've found, even the most difficult conversations, this is something I have to get past, don't always bear the fruit that you expect them to bear. And that's an issue that that's an issue that I'm dealing with. But one of them is, as I said, having the conversations. Another is actually hearkening back to Dr. King and the civil rights movement of the 60s is developing a shared experience. Meaning that in those old days, they had the Freedom Riders, those who would come down from the north and participate in the protests with the people who were living indigenously in those oppressed areas. But what we can do today is have those same not those same shared experiences, but have shared experiences. For example, Pastor David, he was talking about what your young people are doing and how they're going to share in that ministry. But there's more to it than that. Churches, the children of God, need to share in our experiences. We need to find not only just common ground, but common opportunities that we can work together. And in working together, we gain common experience. And you get to know me, and I get to know you. And once those barriers are minimized, then another kind of growth can come out of that. It's a different kind of growth that comes out of shared experiences. So I understand. So that is really where we go from here. And ask questions. If you have black friends, ask them about that. I'm sure that they will be glad to tell you the truth. Tell them I want to know the truth. You heard from this minister who said this was his experience. Have you had any similar experiences?
And one of the things that we learned last week was that a lot of people here have in fact initiated conversations like that since the 1st of June.
Okay.
They have been motivated to ask those kind of questions, and we're certainly encouraging more of that as we go forward. Okay. Other questions?
Other questions?
Okay, I saw Richard's hand. Let me come to you first. I saw your hand first, if you don't mind.
When I was 15 or so, I liked to wear my hat backwards, and I'd like to pull my pants down a little bit and look cool. And my dad said, "Son, if you walk around looking like a gangster, you're going to get treated like a gangster." And those words from my well-meaning father have kind of haunted me. And I'm curious what a similar conversation in a black home might sound like.
Well, it depends on the home. Okay. Let me clarify this. There is no singular or monolithic kind of model for a black home any more than it is for a white home. There's no home that's typical. It's kind of hard to say what a typical home would be like. Let me give you an example of my home. When I was growing up, I had two working parents, mother and a father. And so my experience might have been different than some of my friends. It just depends. That response will just depend on the family. Some families don't see that as a big deal. Others would say would encourage them to wear their hat properly, pull the pants up. Most would, and to be less. What's the word I'm looking for? To be more assimilated, if you will. To understand that the majority, or let's forget the word majority. Let's say every family wants the same thing for their children. Doesn't matter what their nationality is. Doesn't matter what country they live in. It doesn't matter what neighborhood they live in. They all want the same thing. They all want their children to be healthy. They all want their children to be safe. They all want the children to be happy. But the difference is that some families, depending on the nature and the background of that family dynamic, will seek to have that happen in different ways. Even though everybody wants the same end result, they want to go about it differently. And I guess to say that I can't really answer that. I understand your question, but some black families will answer it the same way. Others would not. It's just that we're also, I don't want to speak monolithically for every black family, because that's not a realistic response. I'm sorry, does that answer your question? I'm sorry, I was sort of evaded it, but I don't really have a real answer for that.
I shared with them last week that my grandmother was full-blooded Cherokee Indian, and at the time she came to Knoxville, when my grandfather was killed in coal mines up in Kentucky, she was not ever allowed to attend a white church. So by the time I was born, we were still continuing, and did until her death, to attend nothing except the black African American churches. So that's my heritage.
Okay.
That's where I'm most comfortable. So now I'm the only white member. And so here's what comes up. I work in missions with the children. We have a group of children that sing and play the African drums, and we take them all over. I mean, we've been to Virginia, Alabama, North Carolina, all over Knoxville.
You got to come to our church.
Pardon?
You have to bring them to our church when all
Well,
this is
I'll have
over.
to talk to you about that. But anyway, the issue that comes up, I observe what you're talking about, because we get this big, huge tour bus, and I sit in the very back so I can fellowship with the young men in the church and get to know them better. And when I come off the bus, when we're going someplace that they don't know us really well, there have been a lot of things said. People just can't seem to resist the temptation to say something to me in the women's bathroom or somewhere if I'm off a little bit by myself. And we were coming back from Alabama about a year ago, and we stopped at the rest stop, and everybody piles off the bus, and we all go get snacks and go to the restrooms and everything. And we come back to the curb, and there's all these tractor trailer trucks lined up. And this one truck backs out, and I'm standing there with my brothers Gary and Howard and the pastor. And the truck stopped right in front of us. And I'm standing there, and we're all talking, and Gary leaned down to me and he said, "Yvonne, that truck driver's not going to go on until you walk away from us. He's going to sit right there as long as you're standing with us." And he did. I even motioned for him to go on, and he would not go on. So I walked across in front of his truck and stood in front of the big tour bus. And then as soon as he went by, I turned around and walked right back. I don't know if I did the wrong thing by walking across and letting him go, or whether I should have continued to stand there with them and try to wait the whole thing out. But these kind of things happen quite frequently. Even right here in Knoxville, I get asked all the time, "Why does a woman like you want to go to that church?" And I tell them that's where my heart is, that's where my heritage is, that's where my friends are. That's the church that I belong to, and that's where I belong, and that's where my heart tells me to be.
Good for you. Thank you for your spirit. But I would like to, while you were speaking, something occurred to me. And it's an extension of a question that was asked earlier, and I thought of it when you were telling your story. Each one of you has your own subset of friends. Some of them may be in this church, some of them not. And I don't know your friends. I don't know the conversations that you have when you are with your friends. But one of the things that we can do is that when you hear those negative things, don't let it slide. Just don't let it go and say, "Well, that's wrong, and I'm not going to do it. That's the way they think, and that's them." Say something. Be an active participant in making a change. Don't just let stuff go. I remember when I was working as a manager at TVA. Back in the early days of what's have been called political correctness, one of our workers made a comment about a woman that was made out of ignorance, something to the effect that she shouldn't have experienced the sexual abuse because of the way she looked. And, this same person also used a derogatory term for people from Poland. So I could have let that slide, but I didn't. I explained to him, I said, these are not things that you say, and this is why. And if you want to make a difference, if you want to make a change, it's not just coming here to hear speakers. It's not just coming here and you hear me say, oh, I didn't know that was going on. The thing to do then is to, like when we were all concerned about foreign terrorism, see something, say something. It's the same thing. Racism is terrorism. So if you see something, if you hear something, you have the power to make a difference. Say something.
I think that's the difference between being a racist and an anti-racist.
Anti-racist, yes.
Yeah, which is what we strive to. Other questions? Okay. We don't have a lot of Lutherans, but they're talkative.
It's good to see the young people demonstrating, too, of all races.
Yes.
And I think we shouldn't be so afraid of Black Lives Matter, because they do.
Thank you. That was one of the misconceptions that I wanted to address, and I'm glad that you brought that up. There seems to be this backlash when we hear the words Black Lives Matter. And we want to exchange that for all lives matter. But it's not that all lives don't matter. Obviously, all lives matter. But let me give you an illustration of what that means. There is a hit and run accident on the street. And the first responders come, and they're working feverishly, diligently to stop bleeding, to revive consciousness. They're trying to inject fluids. Well, the idea of saying all lives matter is like someone from across the street. He said, well, that's fine, but all lives matter, not just that one in the street. Well, yeah, that's true, but right now we're dealing with this one. This is the life that is in trouble. And so this is the life that we're focused on in this moment. So what they're really saying is not that other lives don't, but that Black lives matter as well. Or two. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, this is a good dialogue. Other questions?
I can get kind of talkative.
Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Good evening. Thank you for coming. With all the painful experiences you've had and the rich experiences and the work experiences, how did you become a minister?
The short answer is I listened to the Lord. It was a gradual process. It wasn't like a Damascus Road experience or anything like that. It was gradual. I remember when I was living in Philadelphia, I was attending my home church I grew up in, was the Mount Ephraim Baptist Church. And one of the deacons said to me, he said, your father was a deacon here, so I think that you ought to be a deacon too. And my immediate response was, you got to be kidding me. you know, I said, I can't walk those shoes.
You hear that?
But what happened, what did happen was the Lord began to deal with me, and I began to pray and ask him to use me and encourage me or strengthen me to do whatever it was he wanted me to do. And once I accepted that challenge, then other things began to happen, and I began to see myself in a different role. But at first I thought it was hubris. I said, no way, that can't possibly be what the Lord wants from me, because I am not that guy. But then I was called here to Knoxville, and that process just continued, and until the day I accepted. Because I was already had an engineering degree. I was into what I was into. But then what's interesting is you should ask that question, because once I accepted, I said, okay, I'm going to accept that calling in the ministry. The other things went away. I lost my engineering job. I got riffed by TVA. I couldn't find an engineering job anywhere. The only thing I could do was study what the Lord wanted me to study, and to be the person that he wanted me to be. He gave me other income opportunities, but in essence, I was moved out of that and into what he called me to be.
Amen, brother. I certainly identify with that one. All right. Who else? Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
We're not quite Pentecostal enough here. You got to raise them a little bit higher. David, if you pass it back. Thank you.
Thank you. You said something that brought back a memory for me when you talked about the stroller and your mother's telling you couldn't ride in it. When I was a little girl, both my parents worked, and a black lady took care of me.
Okay.
I mean, when I was very young. And she had a daughter my age. And I couldn't stand the mother. I grew up just feeling this, just disliked her. I didn't grow up, but it took until I was a teenager before anybody told me that she wasn't being mean. She was trying to protect her daughter.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that.
She had the little girl had to play in the backyard, and I had to play in the front.
Yeah. Thank you for that experience. And sometimes that could be a difficult. Speaking from back then, that could be a difficult thing to have to deal with, because you're different.
Well, I wonder how her daughter, now that I know what she was doing, it makes it okay. I understand that. It doesn't make it okay that it had to happen, but I'm not, but it makes me sad. How did she explain to her daughter why she couldn't play with me?
Probably much the way my mother explained it to me. I don't remember what the issue was. I really don't, and it probably wasn't as impactful as the reasoning she gave me, which was because you're colored. I just accepted that, and that's and it'd be hard for you to accept it, because we all of us live in our own bubbles, and we do what we do. What we do in our lives are influenced by the influences inside our bubble. And unless you are willing to pop that bubble and step out of it, all of your perceptions, every paradigm that you operate within will be influenced by that small bubble that you're in. Everything will be influenced by that, for better or for worse.
So I have a question. Have we heard about this? And I think it was around when I was growing up, but I honestly have no memory of it.
Okay.
Have you been in a somewhat public place and seen the sign whites only or coloreds only for a water fountain or restroom?
I have not. I grew up in Philadelphia, where that kind of thing was less direct, It was there, but it wasn't in that form. Now I've heard about it now that I pastor a church predominantly African American, not entirely, but predominantly African American, where some of the members are older. They talk about those things in Tennessee, that they actually remember that. I have no personal recollection of it, other than seeing pictures of it.
Okay. All right. Charlie, I'll get back there.
I grew up in eastern North Carolina in the 30s and 40s, and I certainly remember whites only and coloreds only.
Jim Crow, I'm sure you did.
I swam in the municipal pool, which was whites only. Mm-hmm. And I also swam in the Roanoke River with colored boys in my birthday suit. And no, really, and true.
I believe you. No,
and that was great fun, because in Weldon is where the Roanoke River runs into the rapids, and there are rocks, and they had a mudslide, and you'd go down, hit the river, and the current would send you through the rocks, and that was more fun than the white pool. So, and in Weldon, it was about 50-50.
Yeah.
Eastern North Carolina at that time, and so I grew up with colored maids, and it really disturbed me seeing that movie, The Help, and it made me go back and think.
Yeah.
And it also disturbed me, what was it, The Green Book?
The Green Book, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember in Weldon, it was the Terminal Inn, and it was coloreds only.
Yeah.
And so I've taken, I just wish there were frequent flyer miles for field trips, because I've really been on some.
That thing that you brought up, it did remind me of something that is cultural, and that is the idea of taking your food with you on long trips. I remember that, and some people still do it today, particularly on bus excursions. Rather than eat at bus stops, they take food with us. We would carry our own food on trips, on trains, on buses. We didn't fly back then, but cars. I mean, there was, and I never really got the connection as a young person what that actually meant, simply because I wasn't exposed to those specific things. I guess I was kept away from it by eating fried chicken in the back of the bus. But I get that. Jim Crow was real, only I didn't really experience all of it personally.
Okay, we have another question right here.
Yes.
Well, this is not so much a question as it is to ask you what insights you might share or have in light of last week losing a great civil rights leader in John Lewis. And I was wondering, my being from Atlanta and experiencing a lot of John Lewis's career and his life in Atlanta, I was just wondering what you could share about, because he of anybody that I can think of, he was punished and tortured and treated poorly than just about anybody I can think of.
Any insight that I have would be meagerly understated in light of John Lewis's accomplishments. I think, from my perspective, all of us need to take a look at those at lives like him, C.T. Vivian, and ask ourselves, what does that mean for me? What did he do in his life that I can replicate? Obviously, we aren't going to march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge to in an effort to seek voting rights. But we can be bold in our efforts to seek justice for others. I mean, that's really what his life means to me. I mean, I can't stand here and say, oh, that I've done these things like John Lewis, or I can't even imagine some of the things that he's been through, and after having seen it. But I know that some of the work that he's done has benefited my life. I can say that. But we can't let his living be in vain. He lived as an example for all of us to be fighters, to be assertive, not passive, but to be what God calls us to be, to do justice and to love mercy, to walk justly in the sight of the Lord. From my perspective, that's what he did. That's the man that he was. And he exemplified that scripture as much as anyone else.
And just one thing that if I may add to that, I think it's an obvious thing, but it ought not to go unstated, and that is, whereas John Lewis's life began in the way it did, and he suffered mistreatment to the extent that he did, nevertheless, he was elected to the United States Congress and served multiple terms there. To me, that gives hope. We got a long way to go, but it's still possible for a black man to be elected president of the United States, too.
It's still possible.
We know that.
I was reminded earlier by a question earlier about a conversation that I had with a white friend who was remarking about the demonstrations and all of that was going on. And he said, he said, after all of this, nothing is going to change. And I explained to him, well, something has already changed. There's something different that's already going on. He said, well, what is that? I said, look at who's protesting. Look at it. When I was young, and when I walked out of class and we had our little minor demonstrations, it was basically just us. It was just these African American students who were walking down the street in protest for whatever we were protesting for at the time. But look at it now. Even in Japan, they know who George Floyd is. So the change has already happened. We have the protests are no longer so homogeneous, but they expand across cultures and across demographics and across the not only this nation but around the world. Here we have people who are saying enough is enough. And so consequently, I think that the change is already in process. It's kind of like a train that you're trying to stop by throwing a cow in front of it. Only thing that's going to happen, that cow is going to get splattered all over the tracks. So the train is moving, and it's up to us to get on board and help to guide the train, but don't try to stand in front of it.
You have other questions, okay? We'll take one more and then maybe wrap up unless Charlie wants to say something else.
I think Charlie should be wrapping this up, maybe. I was talking to an African American friend recently, and the person, if you'll just speak to this, because it's kind of on the same topic your last sentence was, and he said, well, in my neighborhood, the police come if it's an emergency, but that's all. I mean, he'd been robbed several times, and I'm thinking, I don't think that would happen in my neighborhood. That's happening in other places in Knoxville, though, here.
Okay. Allow me to use your statement to address an issue. We've all heard the term defunding police. And when you hear that, automatically in your brain, you've already made a judgment about what that means. Now, it means different things depending on, the community in which they espouse this. But generally speaking, what defunding the police means is that when you do community policing, you allow the police to do the things that they're trained for. And things like conflict resolution and other non-threatening activities would be handled by social service people so that those situations wouldn't escalate. I remember a situation here in Knoxville a few years ago. I don't know if you recall that it was in East Knoxville, and a young man died who was mentally challenged. I think he may have had a knife, but the situation escalated so quickly that he was shot rather than attempted to be talked down, because the police aren't really trained to talk down people who are in that emotional condition. And so consequently, when they come to black neighborhoods and they're basically there to guard them, automatically what they're thinking is, how am I going to get home alive? And so consequently, they're going to do whatever they think that is required in order for them to survive, because they already feel threatened even before arriving. And it's kind of like going to work in a prison. So what defunding the police means is not to get rid of the police, but to reallocate what they do and restructure what policing looks like. I'll close this with this. I don't remember all the statistics, but you can look it up. In Camden, New Jersey, right across the street from Philadelphia, one of the most crime-ridden cities in America. What they did was they fired the entire police force, and they hired them back. And what happened, violent crime decreased significantly. I don't want to give the statistics, but it's some crazy statistic, like 46% or something, that it decreased by, because the police are now not only doing what the police are trained to do, but because they're trained differently in interacting with the community now than they were before. Before they were guarding the community, now they're more supporting and protecting the community. So those things change. Once those things kind of change, remember that's what defunding the police means. It doesn't mean they go away. Lord knows I wouldn't want to live in that world. But it does mean that things are seen differently. And hopefully, your friend will if it'll come to a point where your friend and others will see a different, have a different relationship with the police in their communities.
Okay, one more. Gotta be quick.
I'm going to be quick. I went down to the Black Lives Matter thing they were painting on the street week before last. There was many white people there painting on it as there were people from the black community.
I'm sure.
And that happens to be right in front of Austin East High School. And I don't know if you're in Knoxville when David Roush took a whole group of our police officers down to Austin East. And they trained for several weeks with the dancers and the drummers there. And officers in full uniform danced with those young people. And I sat in the auditorium alternating between laughing and crying. But David Roush did try to build a lot of bridges in the community.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing that has happened. See now, I'm going to tell you something that someone told me years ago when he first moved here from New Jersey. He said, "You in Knoxville are lucky with your police department." And he said, because you have a police advisory review board that's functional. PARC, Police Advisory Review Committee. P-A-R-C. And what it does is allows this, citizens to speak to someone if they believe that the police have acted outside of the bounds of their jurisdiction, and that in each case is looked at. So he was excited about that, having arrived from North Jersey, because he hadn't seen anything like that before. And so in the policing in Knoxville, it is not perfect, but it is better than it is in many other areas.
All right. Melvin, thank you so much for being here tonight. Do you want to thank him for coming out?
Thank you all for your hospitality, questions. And if you have, oh, by the way, before I leave, if I may, if you have any questions at all, you can write down my email address, and feel free to send me any questions that you have. It's easy to remember, I hope, as Pastor MWW@Comcast.net. Pastor MWW@Comcast.net. Just keep sending those questions. Oh, also, you can also send our questions to our radio show. We have a radio show Saturday mornings. How many people listen to WKXV radio? Not many, I figured. But WKXV radio is primarily a Southern Gospel station. It's at 900 AM and 100.7 FM. We have a show. You may remember Pappy Goo Beaver? The Pappy Show. You remember the Pappy Show? Well, I do the Pappy Show now. But it's not like the Pappy Show. It's a little different. But if you can certainly send your questions on Pastor Melvin Wright Radio, on Facebook, go there and like us there. You have questions there. We can even get your questions on the radio if you like, and we can answer them live and you share them with other people. So feel free. I don't want them to necessarily have to be our last interaction, but I appreciate the interaction that we had. So.
Thank you. So I think the question all of us have is, where do we go from here? And as you know from reading First Notes, those of you who have this week, I have certainly been asking myself that question and have some thoughts about that. But we're going to take 2 or 3 weeks off from these Wednesday sessions, so we will not be here next week or the week after that. Be watching for an announcement about when we will resume and what that will consist of. Have several ideas about that, and I need to kind of hone them a little bit in order to, before I'm ready to share that. I think there's more that we can do, more that we can learn, and become more completely informed about the facts. And I think we've made progress, but we can do more. I want to ask how many of you, and you can't raise your hand, Melvin, and the gentleman, what's your first name? Kevin, right? Okay, you can't raise your hand either. How many of you know what 8th of August is? Okay, Yvonne raised her hand. Okay, right here. 2 people. That's the 4th of July for the black community. That's one of 3 dates that is recognized, and that date is recognized. The 8th of August in 1863, Andrew Johnson released his slaves in Greenville, Tennessee, just up the road. And that is why that date has been observed in this area. I did not know that until yesterday. I was looking on the Beck Cultural Center website and saw something about it, watched a really informative video about it. So in just a few days, they are planning to celebrate. Obviously, the pandemic is going to make things different. I'm not sure how. But if you're interested, I bring it up because that is a significant date. If you're interested in seeing that, participating in that, at least go and look at the video on that website. That was the one day a year in Knoxville when blacks could go to Chilhowie Park. And they saved up their money a good part of the year to go and have a really good time on the 8th of August. And that's why I mentioned that. So go on that website. There's nothing there right now about this year, but there will be, according to the director, in just a few days. Obviously, that's only a few days away. So I mentioned that because I think it's appropriate to mention, and that's another way between now and the next time we gather together like this to become educated about things. So again, thank you for being here. You folks have been really faithful about coming to these sessions, and we're gonna keep going after taking a short break and just watch and listen for what form that will take in the future. Thank you for also working with us in the social distancing, and we're kind of getting used to that a little bit, I think. I don't want to get too used to it, but we may have to. But anyway, thank you for that cooperation as well, and have a good evening.